with David Thorpe, who you know, and Yaron Weitzman, who's traditionally been introduced as a Bleacher Report writer, but now I have to say author. Yaron, how's that sound?
Nice, much more fancy. My grandmother and my in-laws can get on board with that. It's good.
This is the book. Look how beat up my copy is. That's because this book is so good. Look at I dog-eared where I thought something exceptional happened in the book, and it's like, you are a dad. You're a dad, right?
That I am, yes.
This is kind of like having a baby, right?
It is. It is. It is. And my kid started asking for she calls me Abba, it's Hebrew dad. Abba's book there, and she looks for it. Yeah, that's nice.
All right, so welcome everybody. We are going to talk to Yaron for a little bit. If you have questions, we welcome those. Click the little chat button there, and you'll see they'll appear over on the right, and we will get to those in a bit. Congratulations on this. I really feel like I got it in the mail. I didn't know what to think. I read it, and it was revelation after revelation. I can tell that you just worked incredibly hard. You must be proud.
No, I appreciate that. I did work hard on it. That is, can't promise it's good. I think it's good, but I did work hard on it, so I appreciate that.
And there was you live in New York. This is obviously in Philadelphia. You had a baby around this time, and you were just how did you pull all that off?
Yeah, I'm supposed to shout out my wife here, right? That's the move.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yes, my wife, in-laws, siblings, all that. No, but it was crazy. I don't know. It's funny because I've gone to fewer Sixers games this year, just kind of trying to detox a little bit. And I was on the turnpike on the way home one point and stopping by a rest stop to try to find a coffee and some kind of bar to eat. And I got PTSD from that. Just doing that trip nonstop last year, there'd be a turnpike, the 2 hours on the turnpike from New York to Philly, which is just the most monotonous drive you can have.
Not to mention turnpike nutrition. That's not a way to live.
No, that's so funny. I would spend so much time scanning because you get to a dad, you try to not be complete, put on all the weight. So I start scanning the nutritional things, and it's not easy, easy.
No. So there's a ton of stuff in here. The thing that really grabbed me as wow, this is a new understanding of what happened here with the process, but is how it ended. Jahlil Okafor, TMZ, connects surprisingly to Sam Hinkie's resignation. Can you tell us that story?
Sure. I'm going to rewind a little bit because that's what's fascinating about that is the straw. It's a bad cliche, but it fits. The straw broke the camel's back on that one, right? It's just the whole story. It's I think one of the reasons this whole process is so confusing and kind of gets taken in so many different directions is it's not tidy. We like simple things. Why did X happen? Because why? Done. The end, right? And that is not the answer here. So you start with the owners who buy the team, right? Private equity guys, they tear down, they bring a private equity model, which oversimplification of it is you tear things down, right? They correctly discerned that they didn't have a championship team, they tear things down. From there, they realize we don't have a championship team, Bynum trade messes up, so they bring in Hinkie to run the sort of private equity type plan, right? Build up an asset. The funny thing is though, and I think we see this a lot in sports, and I have a quote I wrote down, but professional sports are different than other businesses. So last year at Sloan, Josh Harris goes, we own this chemical company, and this quote's in the book, that was $50 billion, but nobody cares about the prices of propylene, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But the Sixers starting lineup, everyone has an opinion, right? And it's interesting. It's a completely different animal. And Josh Harris, like lots of billionaires, I think it's fair to say is somebody who cares what people think. So you have all that going on in terms of, so everyone says they want to rebuild, but then when you're in it and in the middle of it and you're hearing all the criticisms about the losing and you guys, things are going crazy over there, it's harder to deal with that every day. So you kind of have that storm going on. Then you have this other called storm. I don't know if Sam Hinkie's in the middle of a circle basically, and Scott O'Neil, who's the CEO of the Sixers, was brought in to kind of revitalize the business aspect, came from Madison Square Garden. He's a really smart guy. Everyone says people know him, say they admire his business acumen and his ability to just kind of transform teams like Madison Square Garden. He made a big difference after the Isaiah Thomas, what's the proper term? I guess it was a settlement, right? We'll call it the debacle. How about that? Was that fair? Can we call it that? Okay. So he kind of revitalized it, brought a bunch of big sponsorships. The Sixers hire him away to kind of run business side of things while the quote unquote process is going on. He does some cool things. They do some interest, they slash season ticket prices, Brett Brown is meeting season ticket holders sometimes before games, which is completely crazy and different. But just, you know, the quote was like, you want to have, somebody told me it's about Scott, that Scott would tell them, you want to have everything ready. The goal should be during those years to have everything ready so that when your team is good, you're kind of ready to take off. And we've seen that, right? Like, it's fair to say Sixers, you know, they're really good with that stuff. Scott O'Neil, but then it gets, you know, again, so you're doing building little by little, but at a certain point, the ratings aren't going up and valuations are not going up.
Wait, can I pause you for 1 second to tell the
Yeah, go
story
ahead.
about the campaign that Hinkie's trade screwed up?
Yeah, well, that was, yeah, go ahead.
No, you tell it. But
So there are two things that okay, so these little things are happening, and Scott O'Neil's always been somebody, you know, who will say, trying to, like, they'll push back on this, but let's say he's not somebody, he wants to have a say in basketball operations. We'll put it like that, right? Going back to his Knicks days. Also, hilarious story about Donnie Walsh telling me that, and Donnie Walsh was very clear. I like Scott O'Neil. He doesn't want to, like, he was very clear on this. It wasn't trying to be a hit job, but that he would look over during training camp and see Scott O'Neil. I believe the quote was, you know, hacking the shit out of some of our players on the court while he was playing with them, like in 3-on-3s or whatever. So interesting.
Okay.
That tells you about his personality, right? Okay, so two things. So then the Sixers put out this marketing campaign. I forget, it was Together We Build, or I don't know, something like, you know,
sounds right.
You guys can guess whatever it is. And has Michael Carter-Williams, Joel Embiid, and Nerlens Noel, I believe was the third one. I'm trying to remember. I believe there was Nerlens was the third player on the campaign, and it's right before the deadline. And that comes out, let's say the deadline that year is February 15th. The campaign comes out maybe February 13th. I might be messing this up a little bit. And they trade Michael Carter-Williams 2 days later to the Bucks.
And I'm sure a campaign like that was months of planning and ad buys and blah, 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 right?
Yeah, like, Scott O'Neil was not happy about that. He's gone on podcast and laughed about it. You know, he's like, give him credit for that. He went on a podcast and kind of mentioned that as like a learning experience. And I don't know. I just that hurt. Let's say that hurt inside. So there was that one. Then also, just for the proof is, you know, Scott. I called somebody last year, and I'll be a little behind the process here, but like, well, not the literal, not Sixers process, my process.
Tough work, man.
I called someone exactly. I called someone last year, Scott Cutler, who was a former president of StubHub or something like that. I knew he knew Scott O'Neil, and he's telling me a story about how they work together. And the Sixers have StubHub as a jersey sponsor, and they were the first team to do so. Mm-hmm. They got on this jersey sponsorship before anyone else. He's talking. I asked him about the first time he met Scott O'Neil, or the first time, Scott O'Neil pitched him. He's telling me the story, and it was in the fall of, I think it was 2017, but before Hinkie was out, right? I'm just going to lose track of the dates here. Basically, Scott O'Neil came, or maybe the fall of 2015, that's what it was, and the jerseys came on, the sponsorship was allowed in 2017, 2018. So Scott O'Neil's pitching StubHub on sponsoring the Sixers. And one of the things that I asked Scott Cutler, like, were you worried about attaching yourself to a team that was kind of resembled losing, right? That was one thing they were known for, losing. And he told me that Scott O'Neil told him by that point, by the time the jersey sponsors won't be allowed for another 2 years, whatever, by that point, we'll have a winning team. We'll be on the up. And that is Sam Hinkie. If there's one thing that he was not signing up for, were timelines. Mm-hmm. Timelines was not his thing. He thought those were where you got into trouble, and he's probably right? If you do artificial timelines, that's how you rush into tough decisions or bad decisions. So you have that going on. And just furthermore, you know, Scott O'Neil, he even told me, and he'll push back on this, I'm sure, but he gave me a quote accidentally, and I'll explain the accidentally in a second, but he said Sam did it to himself, someone had to take the hit. And that happened when I introduced myself to Scott O'Neil in Detroit last year. I think it was in Detroit. Told him I was writing a book on the Sixers and who I was doing and who I was. And, you know, I told him it's kind of funny, you're kind of the boogeyman to all major Sixers process fans. And that's when he said that to me. He never did an interview, everything like that. Never said off the record. I wrote it down immediately. I'm clear about that. So that, you know, when he says that to me, it's kind of like, okay, well, we're not even assuming anymore. You know, you're kind of showing your cards. Yeah. So you have all that going on, right? All the other stuff going on. And then Jahlil Okafor comes in. And how they got to Jahlil Okafor, I mean, talk about, again, Sam Hinkie in the middle of this giant circle of storm. It's like there are a million things that led to it. One of which was Andy Miller, who was Kristaps Porzingis' agent, and maybe Porzingis doesn't end up in the Sixers. We don't know, but they were essentially giving Sam Hinkie the runaround in the lead up to the draft, which included Kristaps Porzingis hiding in a bathroom doing a photo shoot, and Sixers staffers hearing him make barfing sounds at some point as they wanted to work him out. And why? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. Part of the reason And part of the reason they didn't want Porzingis in Philly was because the same agent represented Nerlens Noel and wasn't happy with how things went there. There's also the self-serving part that because the same agent represents Nerlens Noel, you don't want two big men in the same place. That's not good for you. So it goes both ways. So some of it's
There was real like Andy Miller wasn't the only agent who was
correct.
this was declared war on Hinkie's front office.
Yes,
right?
This was a whole thing. Correct.
Yeah.
And I was pointing out the part that so some of it maybe Sam did to himself. Some of it is an agent looking out for his own best interest, which you get, right? You don't want, if you have two top 5 picks on one team, that could get messy in terms of who's getting playing time, who doesn't, all that. So which gets us to all this, as this is going on, so the noise is all building and everything's hearing, and Josh Harris is hearing things from every corner. And like Mark Lazary told me, gave me a quote, it's pretty simple. Fans don't like coming out to see losing teams. So this is all happening. And Jahlil Okafor comes in. And Jahlil Okafor's story is sad, right? I mean, he's somebody who saw, I think he was 8 years old or whatever, 10. His mother died in front of him, basically. He thought she was coughing. He thought she was joking because they clowned around.
Yeah.
He said something like, I'm going to go get the Oreos or something. I'm going to go raid the kitchen cookie box. She kept coughing. They realized it wasn't. They rushed to called 911, went to the hospital. She died. And that guilt, like that haunted him for years. And
he feels like if he had more quickly recognized it was serious, he might have saved it.
Yeah, which I mean, I imagine that's how anyone in that situation would feel, right? So I don't think I think he would agree with this. Though again, I never got to ask him this, but I don't think he would. I think he would agree that he probably had trouble dealing with that. I mean, many of us would, right? Like as he was younger, he didn't properly reckon with it. So he comes in, and like a lot of kids who are in that situation, not the situation of their mother dying, right, but the situation of entering the NBA, that's a big change. And there's all these kind of things and distractions happening around you. And he starts drinking. He starts going out. And I'm not going to say, don't want to make it seem like he's an alcoholic or anything, but he was partying. He was going out and getting drunk. And there was the incident. There was the one incident, which was public. This was like the one about a guy pulling a on him. I'm gonna forget that detail, but he was walking down the street and a guy in a car, he started getting to a thing with a guy in a car and the guy pulled a gun on him. Jahlil ran away or something. Basically, the other guy ran away. There was never a police report. Basically, what happened was some park rangers figured out it was Jahlil, ended up in Wells Fargo Center. They didn't know the Sixers were practicing somewhere else. We're not trying to arrest Jahlil or anything like that. They wanted to get the guy. They understood that they wanted to try to find out who the guy with the gun was. And they thought maybe Jahlil could help. So the message, because it's the guy, a park ranger, shows up at the Wells Fargo Center, this message gets filtered along to higher ups. One of the people is Sixers director of security. He calls Sam Hinkie, tells him, what's going on. The mention gets to Hinkie. Basically, there was concern that, Hinkie wasn't looking out enough or kind of taking care of dealing with the situation. Some people might push back on that. People do push back on that. People know Hinkie. They say he did talk to him, so he could do. Again, I don't know the answer. It's hard unless you were there. It's hard to say. It might be one of those things where there is no simple answer, right? So that happens. So there's issues going on, and I think the NBA is kind of aware, right? These things are not kept as secrets. Like we all know, there are a lot of things that happen. People talk in general. League office knows. Then we have the infamous TMZ video, which was the night after Thanksgiving. And in terms of one of these crazy what ifs, like I think the Sixers blew like a 10-point lead that game against the Celtics. Like if they win, the thing's different. I don't know. And Jahlil goes out. There's a TMZ video of him drunk. He's drunk and slurring and cursing people out. Things were crazy. And that video is playing on a loop on TMZ and on ESPN and everything like that. And the way it was explained to me is the commissioners, I guess the guy's name is Jerome Pickett. I think it's the vice president of security, is called the Sixers. And this isn't the only, I'm sure there are dots between that I just don't want to assume, but I guess we can guess what they were. But he called the Sixers head of security and says, like, the commissioner wants to know why one of his players is on TV on this kind of situation, and no one from the Sixers says, let him know. And from that moment on, it kind of seemed like that was it. Lawyers were brought in to depose some of the Sixers front office.
Well, that step's huge, right? So
yeah,
Josh Harris uses a law firm to depose his own employees.
Yeah, to find out what's going on.
Justice was broken at that point, right?
Right, exactly. I think that was it. Then that basically leads to Jerry Colangelo. So that's why it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. So maybe if that was its only incident that happened, I mean, that wouldn't even make sense because it wouldn't be. But if like there was just the Jahlil thing and nothing else, but that happening and Sam, Hinkie having people from all sides kind of coming at him, agents, employees like Scott O'Neal, other people, other owners, that became it. And Josh Harris caring what people think and, being susceptible to pressure. I think that's one of the things that we've learned about him over the years, whether it was Doug Collins, Sam Hinkie, Colangelo's, whatever. That was spelled the end for Hinkie.
What was the timeline? Like, how long between the TMZ video and Hinkie's resignation? Do you remember?
Oh, that's a good one.
Right?
Yeah, so let's say TMZ, that was like Thanksgiving, right? That was around
Yeah.
Thanksgiving time. So Hinkie resigned in April, but Jerry was brought in. Jerry Colangelo was brought in, I guess it was around January.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I always remember that Hinkie resigned in April because the weirdest is he did that Zach Lowe podcast literally, I think the day before he resigned. And I don't know why I remember that, but it was the funniest thing.
Yeah. He kind of like didn't participate really meaningfully in media basically at all. And then right at the end, he was like, let's do some stuff.
It's the funniest thing. It's the funniest thing. It's amazing.
It felt like when you're watching the football team that just runs and runs and runs and then finally start throwing the ball when they're like down 20 in the fourth quarter. I'm like, why didn't you throw before?
Exactly.
Okay, wow. So that's just one of the episodes where I feel like I don't think anybody knew any of this, right? This is all original stuff that no one else has.
Sure, yeah, all original. Buy the book, all original. No, I think I don't know. A lot of it is. I think it's funny because people ask like, what's the biggest bombshell from the book? And I don't have great answers. Like I think what the book does mostly.
Just say this.
Fine, this I'll say. I think I added details and background and kind of elaborate on some little things that we might have known or kind of knew and just flesh them out a little bit. That's kind of what
maybe I'm just ignorant, but I felt like a lot of times I was like, I've never seen this before anywhere.
Hey, no, that's better. That works better for me.
Yeah. So just recapping, if you have questions, you can put them in the little chat. And David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks. So, Yaron, I definitely learned something from there, and I've been following this stuff pretty closely for years. So I don't know if you read the stuff that Henry and I have written this week about the Sixers. I'm an on-court guy, so something is going on where the Sixers are so good at home, the best in the league, and the Knicks on the road, basically literally the same record with horrible point margins on the road. And Henry very insightfully said, well, there's nothing on the road that's causing it to be that dramatic. It's not, and he's right. The professional basketball players it normally translates wherever you play, right? The Bucks are pretty similar no matter where they go, and the Lakers, whatever. Other teams may play better at home against you, right? But you shouldn't be playing so badly. And they've been horrendous, especially defensively. And in studying the film and everything, and then knowing all the background kind of stuff we know, I believe that the team has lost, they become desensitized to Brett Brown in a very normal way that we see in the NBA all the time, which is why you see so much turnover frequently with coaching, right? They just, the messaging gets tired, and therefore the messenger is just kind of tuned out. However, as we've seen, as we wrote, as you saw, you look at some of the best dynasties in a sense, the Spurs, the Warriors with Kerr, Phil Jackson's two, both in Chicago and LA, the leadership that they had helps kind of get through the mess of the same messenger and the same message. And the Sixers are stuck with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, very flawed messengers. And then Henry really had me point to Joel Embiid. Because honestly, I so focus on court, I tend to miss a lot of off-court stuff that happens. Although I did catch his comments last night after the win of being the best player in the world, which really shocked me that he would say that. But give me your thoughts in terms of all the people you've talked to and everything on that issue of Brett Brown being there a long time and Joel Embiid being so, in a sense, his Tim Duncan, and he's no Tim Duncan. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's one of the most interesting things, right? Like, it goes back, I kind of call it sometimes the original sin of the Sixers, and I always try to be careful. One of the things is Brett comes in, and the team it's a different young team, they're rebuilding, and he's a player's coach, and he's a player development guy. And there is a line of thought out there from a lot of people that, like, so the Noel example, I don't mean to throw Nerlens under the bus, but there are stories in there, him showing up to late team plane being held for him, things like that. The things were allowed back, going to the start when Brett came in. And there are a lot of people out there who think that stuff if you don't nip that in the bud then, right? And that comes with Joel when he comes in. You know, not in the bud then when these guys become superstars, there's nothing you can do. Part of it is like there's always something uncomfortable about saying like blaming the coach, like these players are adults, and blaming the coach for how you got to boss around, you got to go drill sergeant on these young guys, and otherwise it's not on you. But it's definitely a line of thoughts that the parts with Joel. I mean, again, it's like Joel stuff's so interesting because his first season was, you know, all this stuff's documented in terms of the weight gain, and he got into an argument with and this was published then, right? Back then, he got into an argument with this was a strength coach officially about a guy who wanted to get his weight, and there was a whole thing that came out. Joel's first year, he was dealing with his brother dying, right? His brother was killed. His 13-year-old brother was killed. He goes back to Cameroon, comes back. So again, you're dealing like, there's nuance. It's kind of like the Okafor thing too, right? So it's a guy who's first year in the NBA, and not only that, but he's mourning, right? He's probably, I think he's even said he was depressed. I don't want to, maybe I should be careful about that word, but I think he said that word before. So how do you deal with that? That's really tough, right? And it's hard to, if you're going to chew Joel, like somebody who's mourning their brother, you're going to chew them out regularly when they're a rookie, you know, for showing up late or things like that. And they sent him home a few times. Fast forward, and I guess the simple answer is Joel Embiid's the most powerful person in that organization, and he can do whatever he wants. And that's a simple answer, right? So if you have those guys who they're like that and are not going to be the leader in terms of conditioning, in terms of whatever thing it is, it's really hard. And you could blame the coach, you could not, I don't know.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that real quick,
Yeah.
Player, I think more than one player has complained in the circles that I'm able to talk to as a coach. They're fucking sick of hearing Brett Brown say, throw the ball inside. And then you read about Joel Embiid wanting the ball even more. And I know, Henry and I talked about this, there's little that pisses players off more than the coach kissing one guy's ass, especially when that guy's an asshole. You can kiss Steph Curry's ass all you want, Steve Kerr. You're good. Because Curry would never say he's the best player in the world. He might say Klay Thompson's the best shooter. He might say Durant's the best scorer. He might say Green's our glue. He's never going to talk about himself. So that combination of being totally enabled, and it's enabling a jackass in a sense, right? Where they're angry at the way he treats them. So do you see that thing? Because that's what we were writing about. This is not the guy you want to enable because of how he treats all the other guys.
Yeah, I don't want to use the word jackass. I'll let you use that. I don't want to use that word.
I'm quoting other
That's fine.
players.
Okay.
I never met
No, that's fine.
way worse.
I have no doubt.
And by the way, I saw him play live in high school, and I'd never heard of him before because I don't really follow like high-level prospects.
Yeah.
I texted my longtime friend, Masai Ujiri, knowing he played at a school called The Rock, which was famous for bringing athletes from Africa in. And I said, is this one of your guys? And he raved about Embiid. This is before the game. I had no idea he was going to Kansas. I was in love with the way he played. I was in love the way he connected to his teammates. Part of the process is dealing with superstardom. He was probably an amazing guy for much of his life. It's really hard when you're that talented and enabled at the same time. And this is what we have now.
Right. And he's like you said, he was a basketball genius. He's really a genius in all terms. I mean, I don't want to say like, the guy's funny in his second language. Like, do you know how hard that is, right? That's really hard to do, right? So the basketball that in terms of picking that stuff up, like there's clearly there, and he just made a choice to not, you know, I'll say like, to not eat the way he probably should, things like that, right?
Right.
So yeah, so go back to the original question. I mean, I'm sure Brett Brown grates on them a little bit, and yeah, like I think. Damian Lillard is a good example, right? Damian Lillard is the guy everyone talks to. You hear anyone talk to him, the ultimate leader. And you throw out all cliches with guys like that. Like it's all cliches and the it factor and this and that. And you hear people talk about it. It's like, oh, come on, that's not. But it's actually a real thing. Yeah. You talk to anyone around Portland, they'll say it's a real thing. The way he galvanizes people, the way he push people, kind of knowing how to toe the line between tough and soft and all that. And some people have that and some people don't. And I think it's fair to say Joel Embiid does not have that. It doesn't mean you can't win with him, right? We've seen guys win. It doesn't mean, you know, and for all we talk about the Sixers, like they come close, right? They came close, and who knows this year? So like, it doesn't mean, you know, we could probably talk about the, you know, roster decisions. Those are different, right? And if maybe some roster decisions are made differently this year, they're playing better in terms of how off-season money is spent. But yeah, it puts you behind the eight ball, I believe, and that's based on people talking to, right, reporting and hearing the stories. It makes it difficult, and yeah, I think. You know, Brett, he might have dug his own holes in a bit, and he might be in a no-win situation also. It's kind of a combination.
I wanted to read this question now. When we published something yesterday, the True subscriber, All Upside. I don't think that's the person's real name, but
Could be. Who knows?
this baby is so gorgeous. Let's call it All Upside. Said, I guess the first part, Henry, in your final sentence, the first graph, he sticks his nose in other people's business, bosses people around, ignores his coaches and trainers, and 100 other things that fit him squarely in the category of nobody's idea of the next Tim Duncan. I'm curious about your level of confidence in some of those claims. Yaron, how do you think I did on those claims?
Pretty. Want to read them again? Read them again.
I mean, I think I'm actually just citing publicly reported things, but sticks his nose in other people's business, bosses people around, ignores coaches and trainers, and 100 other things that fit him squarely in the category of not the next Tim Duncan.
Yeah, the ignores coaches and trainers. But I mean, like, yeah, I think that's kind of that's documented, right? I don't even think like on report like that's like that's documented for years.
Yeah. So 100%, I'm going All Upside. We're 100% confident on those points. Okay, then he says, I'm curious about your level of how different is that from what other superstars are doing, and how would you advise Coach Brown, blah, blah, blah. So I think what I just want to, before you guys answer, to me, I don't see Tim Duncan as the only way you can win a championship, right? That's a style Brett Brown cites a lot, right? Brett Brown has, I think, Baxter Holmes wrote that story about Greg Popovich's team dinners, where there's just so much trust and love, and that team dinner is how you stitch a team back together after they lose to LeBron in the finals, right? I think Brett Brown has a very clear sense of how to run a team where everybody trusts each other and loves each other like that, right? And I feel like I can almost picture him. He's a really nice guy. I can picture him like loving being in that environment, right? Embiid just isn't the guy who can make that happen, right? He's plenty good to lead a championship team, but it's not going to happen where the culture is going to emanate from him and where he's going to keep the problems in house and where he's going to make teammates feel better. Like, David's thing about he said he's the best player in the world last night. Like, we were joking before, and I'm like, if he said Ben Simmons was the best player in the world, that would be a Tim Duncan move, right? But he said he's the best player in the world, and somewhere Ben Simmons is like, man, you're not even the best player on this team, not this year, right? So anyway, so to me, the point isn't that Embiid needs to be anything other than who he is, but it's just that if the team's going to flourish around him, somebody else is going to have to make Ben Simmons feel involved, right? Somebody else is going to have to figure out the nutrition plan that's going to work. Somebody else is going to have to figure out, and on, whatever we think Tim Duncan stands for. Lillard, in your example, is a good one where Lillard lifts up his teammates consciously as part of his assignment for himself, right? Embiid's not going to be that guy. Agree?
Right. I agree. Yeah, I think that's like, I'll say it simply, 100% I agree, right? And again, it doesn't mean, right, and what you said is true, right? It doesn't mean you can't win a championship with guys like that. I'm sure we can go through a list of, teams. Like, was Michael Jordan, I was going to say, right, exactly. Like, was Michael Jordan lifting guys up? I mean, I guess if you say punching Steve Kerr in the face is lifting him up, it inspires him in some way.
I don't say that. Yeah.
Some would, though, right? Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's one of the more interesting things. And I'm sure there are all these conversations, like, it's almost a window to a deeper conversation about stardom in the 21st century, and these guys come up and they're really powerful, and social media is all these million tentacles that can come off of this, and that probably make it harder to build a basketball team the way a coach might want or the way a front office might want. But those are different conversations. It's not easy. I guess that's a simple answer.
David, I know you're just dying to address the, like, what would you do if you were managing Embiid? Like, how do you handle this situation?
Well, it's funny. I am dying to. Just when you hear you guys talking, I think that I believe that people can grow and change, right? So that's what I would focus on with Joel. I would really invest time because if you're going to keep it for a long time, showing him the evidence of what can happen when your best player is also your best culture builder. Okay, it's not the only way to do it. It's a great way to do it, and it's the best thing for not just the team but for him. And let him do it his own way. I was telling Henry on an earlier phone call about George Karl from when he was coaching the Kings. We had dinner one night, and he was telling me that we were talking about DeMarcus Cousins, and I basically said the same thing to him as I'm saying to you right now. that people can change. And he absolutely agreed. And his worry was that he's finally going to figure it out. I just won't be coaching him anymore. Either I'm going to be fired or he's going to be traded. Of course, he was right. And as I said to Henry earlier, if he does get hurt last year and the Warriors just lose, actually, maybe they could have lost both guys that they did in Thompson and Durant. They could still have won. If they just keep one of those guys and have Cousins, they roll. DeMarcus has really grown up. I heard reports about him in New Orleans, where Anthony Davis was absolutely the alpha male, and DeMarcus was fine with that because Davis is amazing. Well, Ben Simmons is amazing. Different, but amazing. Very talented and still growing as a player. If Joel can make that kind of progress, and so I wouldn't quit on that. I would try to a lot of these players don't know how to be that person. I mean, a lot of us as men, I don't know how to be a dad. I mean, I had a dad. Good men knew how to be a dad. You figure stuff out, you research, you learn, as long as you value it. And that, to me, is where, as if I was a GM, that's where I would really get down to the small nugget of, does he really value being that person? If he doesn't, then you got to move him. That's how
I was this is more as a basketball fan than in terms of author reporter, but I was disappointed that they lost the way they did last year. And I've told this to people, right? They lose on literally inches, right? They lose in game 7. And that's after, right. And Embiid, his body, he between being sick and his knee, he was a mess coming down the stretch. And he got it out, played great. Or didn't play great, but he got it out, did his best. And that he didn't come back after seeing just inches, bounces being the difference, and thinking, oh, you know what? Maybe if I was a little stronger, a little better, a little more healthy, that could have made a difference. And that he didn't come back this season, this training camp. We make fun of the stupid Instagram picture where the guy lost 20 pounds and it's caught and shows a 6-pack, but it would have been nice to see that from Embiid, right? And that didn't happen. And again, this is me as giving an opinion, but that didn't happen after that kind of loss and that kind of ending for him. That was disappointing to me and almost telling, because I would think that if there would be a moment that you kind of reckon, and I should add, the loss got to him. We all saw on national TV, right? We all saw how he reacted, how much that was real. And that didn't trigger any massive changes. And I'm sure I'll be told, no, he did this, that, but we watched the games.
We haven't seen evidence of the change. I want to ask you one other thing. So based on reporting and just your own eyes, because you went to a bunch of games, more off the court than on the court, what aren't we getting from Ben Simmons, you think, as an overall personality because of Joel Embiid? I mean, maybe the answer is he is who he is. What do you think about Ben Simmons? If Joel was more like Tim Duncan, or not even there at all, what will we see more from Ben?
That's an interesting question. I think a short answer might be I don't know if Ben's listening to much, if other people influencing Ben like that. Again, Ben, we're talking about guys who grew up. Ben, he was one of the first really in terms of the social media microscope being on him at 18, 19 at LSU. That was kind of the ride. He was one of the first guys like that.
Both of those guys played in Florida in high school. Simmons was at Montverde and Joel was at the Rock, 2 of the big time programs. And he was one of the first. And Ben, he's a star, and in his mind, he's a star, and deservedly so. I don't think. I don't know how. That's a great question. I never thought of it. If Ben, we'll use Duncan or Lillard again, right? If he's playing a team like that, is he playing differently? Is he taking jump shots? Maybe. I don't think so. I think the thing.
Talk about what's up with him in the jump shots. What is the deal? What's your understanding of this?
He just won't shoot it. Why? I've tried asking him. I don't know. I mean, some people say he doesn't want to look bad, right? But the weird part is if you go to a game, nothing is a knockdown shooter. He could hit corner threes. Yeah. He could shoot corner threes. He could hit them. It's not beautiful, but it's not if you don't know who he is and you show up at a game, you see him shooting, you wouldn't say there's anything wrong with him. You'd say, okay, guy's not a great shooter from certain areas. So why he won't take that, I'm sure part of it's stubbornness too, or not even I don't know, all human beings, right? When Brett Brown says, tell his agent, tell his brother, I want 1 3 a game. And then Ben goes out and I don't think he's taken one since. First of all, kind of telling about how much you're listening to your coach, how much your coach's voice is carrying, and the fact that the coach is and the fact that the coach is saying that in public is and knows that there's a shot that's going to happen. That kind of gives you an idea of okay, I guess I'll take my last Hail Mary shot here. So
who he reminds me of in this? When Blake Griffin played for the Clippers, he didn't shoot threes, but they said that he did in practice. They were like, he can't shoot.
Yeah, he took him in summer league.
he just didn't want to do it yet, right? And now he shoots him when he can get on the court. He
Last year,
shoots a million threes, right? He had to like unearth it somehow. Like he had to own it or something. But maybe that's hope for Ben Simmons.
Now I'll tell you the thing. He won't shoot them in games, like in training camp games, scrimmages. He won't shoot them there. He'll do like, if he's warming up, you'll see him or he's practiced, worked on it. He brought his brother in to be their shooting coach last year with him. That's no longer the case.
Yeah.
I'll leave. Others can offer their opinion on that. I
feel like you kind of did, Yaron.
I mean, is there another person in the NBA who has his brother as his shooting coach? I don't know. Or had his brother as a shooting coach. Maybe I'm wrong. Seriously. But then all that being said, like maybe if the teams, this goes back to the weirdest thing with them is that you have these two guys and they're stars and they're probably not a great fit together, but you have to deal with it because you have two stars. What are you going to do? Like if we swap, if you give Ben Simmons the Giannis treatment and build a team based around his skills and, 3-point shooters and all that, is he an MVP candidate? Very possibly, right?
Yeah.
We saw last night. I know they won, but how much they missed him last night.
Yeah. Well, they didn't have the greatest player in the world, so that was good.
So, and just real quickly, going back to yesterday, when we wrote about their lack of fight, their lack of communication, and Dan Levitar talks with us all the time about in professional sports. He's very right on this. These are incredibly competitive people at pro sports. As someone who works with them in the off season, if I don't see the real focus that I need, I go right to a competition, not against each other in terms of physical stuff because I can't afford injuries. So I do any kind of contest, it's on. They are in a way. Sometimes I wish my son was more that way. They just want to kill somebody else all the time.
That's interesting.
And yet we see this team play, and I showed a couple of the GIFs yesterday. When you have Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid as your 1 and your 5, you could, the three of us could be on that, and they won't be the worst defense in the league. And I'm serious. Well, maybe at me at 40, now at 55. When your point guard is the best point guard defender in the league, and your 5 is the best defensive center next to maybe Rudy Gobert, you can't be a terrible defense, and yet they are. And that lack of fight. So, you're as a reporter, I know I hear this stuff from my players like, man, I'm not fucking playing for this guy, where they're just tired. Do you feel that? Do you sense that? And have you sensed that before, where they just don't have that fight because they're pissed and they're upset or they're disappointed?
It's funny. The short answer is no. I haven't heard about the being pissed part. I always kind of went like, there's an entitlement is a place I always went with that it's like they flip the switch type thing. Like they think they can flip it. But
which never
usually
works.
Right. And usually like the Warriors do that after winning 2 championships, right? Or like LeBron teams, which is LeBron's a whole separate
thing. Exactly. Can't count that easy exception.
Right. So otherwise, that's what I always thought about it. To me, that's the place I always went, and kind of maybe that's kind of more the angle of the conversations I've had with people around them, that thinking that there's just a sense of entitlement that, we'll be good. We're okay. We don't have.
I'll tell you what else.
Playoff time.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think Embiid might be the kind of guy who can make it happen. So in the stats from Ben Falk's site we were looking at yesterday,
sure he's loving
shooting a ton of mid-range jumpers, right? Like this year, Joel Embiid's catching the ball a lot, and then he's just turning and he's guarded and he's just shooting that shot. Like he won't do that in the playoffs, right? In the playoffs, he'll get way better positioning and he'll get himself fouled way more and he'll fall down more. We've seen this before, right? He plays with this way that's like, maybe unsustainably hard how he plays, right? I could see that he might be the one who's like, I just can't do that all year, or he doesn't want to, or he's out of shape. And he might actually be – so this year he's been basically very average on offense all in because of this thing, and great on D. Like I could see that if he just – he'll be doing a little bit of a LeBron move, right? A little bit of it could be a playoff Embiid, could be much better.
Yeah, I mean, being a big man's hard, right? I'm sure his body hurts. You don't think like that guy's been how many surgeries now? I forget the exact one, but right, the fee and the ACLs or whatever. It's funny though. You go like, David, you probably know. You can speak on this probably better than me. Like, I sometimes go with it. Especially with Embiid's performance this year. A lot of it. Some of it I put on the front office. The moves, like he's playing with, there's no space. And I always thought that was strange. And like, I always wonder how much that affects too, right? And maybe it's not fair. And again, it might be a kind of thing where the answer is yes to all of them, right? And no simple answer.
not just space, but also IQ. I think they have a unique team of I think some of the guys they brought in to play, whether it's young veterans or young players who aren't veterans yet, they don't know how to play. They make a lot of dumb mistakes, and they're not great energy guys. And I've always felt they're a team that needs to bring a lot of energy. There was good news. We don't want to disappoint Philly fans totally. You guys have skirted around the edge a little bit on this, and you're right that it can get better in the playoffs, right? As Henry just said that. Last night, Brett Brown was asked, "What are you doing?" Because they were down by 20, I think, in the first half, maybe first quarter.
It's like a 40-8 run, whatever that was. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the craziest runs you ever see. And Brown was asked, "What did you talk about?" And he said, They're kind of bringing quick doubles to Embiid. We want him to act quickly and assertively. I call it quick attack, and he did it. And I thought, oh, okay, this is a sense where he's listening to his coach instead of saying, "Man, don't tell me how to do this. I know how to do this." And that was encouraged by that. But I also know that even though they did have the All-Star game, it was a break. So this is first game back. I do think the body things, and I know Henry and I have written about this. We talk about it all the time. How you feed your body and how you take care of it means so much. So Henry's point of him playing so hard, it's not sustainable. Exactly. That's why you better listen to people regarding nutrition and rest and whatever, because the only way we're going to win is if you are, quote unquote, the best player in the world. Then at least we have a fighting chance. You can't be that way if you're not in tip-top shape. It's arrogant to think otherwise. And if you don't believe us, ask Nikola Jokic. Because I was writing about him in November and getting beaten up for being a fat shamer. I don't care how heavy he is. I only care about as a basketball player. You can't look like that and lead Denver to a championship. And now, I swear to you, there's been a couple of times where I've seen a picture of Jokic, and for a moment I thought it was Porzingis. He's skinny in his upper half of his body. He's so skinny, and it's going to keep coming off. If he's living the right way and eating the right way, Embiid can learn. Jokic is a very similar player to Embiid in a lot of respects. Incredibly crafty and skilled, and with the mindset of a guy that can beat you in so many ways offensively, and Embiid's just a much better defensive player. If he can look like that, now all of a sudden he and Simmons can it could be.
You guys really fast. I think I'm right. Either I'm using the software wrong or nobody has submitted a question yet, which is fine. I'm having a great time. We only have a few minutes left. So if you want to put a question in, click the little chat button, put it in there. And if you put it in now, you'll be first in line. Yaron, can you tell us the little part of the book, which was Brett Brown overheard? I don't want to get this incorrect, saying basically we're all going to get fired because what's the story? I don't. You.
That's I know. Same. I should just read it off and say, okay, I'm done, right?
So we don't all get fired.
Right. Okay, so I believe basically in Miami, it was, and people remember this game, it was Dwayne Wade's last home game in Miami last year. The Sixers were in town. They ended up getting smoked by 40. I want to say before the game. Basically, Brett Brown had a meeting with the team's medical staff, and there was some yelling, and it was basically, we're all bleeped if we don't get, and I'm paraphrasing there to be clear if anyone listening, because I don't know who is. We're all in trouble. We're all bleeped if we don't get Joel in shape. Joel doesn't get in shape.
So I made up the fired part. That was from me. That was from my imagination.
No, I think fired would have been there. I think.
Was in there? Okay.
I'm saying bleep. Okay. I'm saying bleep. Fired, all of it. Right? It was. Okay. Brett likes to. Brett likes to curse. People don't know that, but Brett likes to curse. Yeah. So that's the short answer. Be like the team's very like this is not like something that everyone says. Oh, this is great, cool, all good. It just.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually an extremely telling episode, right? Like everyone's very worried about these. Like, I feel like. The game is sort of the franchise hangs in the balance of that, right?
You got cut off at the beginning part.
I got a little thing. My connection's unstable.
Do you think Yaron that I think his job's protected now that he's made it through the All-Star break? I wasn't convinced.
He's not.
He's gonna have.
I mean, listen. I'm not gonna say definite. I'd be shocked if anything happens before the season. After the season, everything's on the table, right? And that's not like. I think that's kind of everyone knows that, says that. But yeah, I don't think this.
Can I
I'd be
ask you a
shocked.
question about the owner also?
Sure, please.
So I've talked to Josh before and Blitzer when all of this was first happening. In fact, I prepped Sam Hinkie for his first interview for those guys, going back a long way.
Interesting.
I'm
sure spoken to you.
I'm sure there's 50 people that did that. But I knew some of their mindsets, whatever. But do you find, I don't know how much you know about Josh Harris, but you know about his business. Do you find irony that he's sensitive to how other people look at him when in that business, they don't really care much about anything else but the bottom line?
Yeah, I'm not. I will say the short answer is yes. I will. I don't feel sympathy for Josh Harris. How about that? Yeah. The people can look up the hostess. If you want to look up certain companies and what Apollo and there's some. There's plenty of stuff written about private equity and Apollo specifically out there. And I mean, Henry's written a ton of it, right?
Yes.
What?
It's cutthroat. It's not a business. He's
yeah. Right. Exactly.
Too.
But I think there's just to acknowledge more than people have personality types or toughness, there's in different circumstances, right? In the circumstance of purchasing an NBA team, every owner practically is they buy it to look cool, right? That's the reason for the purchase, right? So if you're this thing that you purchase to make you look cool, it's like buying a toupee, right? If your toupee makes you look worse, it's extra stupid to have ever purchased it at all, right?
I'll add one.
Bought this to look cool, and then it made that thing made him look stupid. He's not putting on his Apollo hat here. He's putting on his what? This was supposed to be my cool thing when I walked in the room.
For sure. He sits courtside. He sits by the bench every game, which I don't know. I've always meant to count. I know Cuban does that, but he's not on the bench, but he's pretty close, right? He's near things. I'll say this. I'm saying this purposely like this. Ask anyone about David Blitzer, anybody, and all they say is he's a great guy.
Yeah.
I won't. I'll end the sentence there.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not been a big newsbreaker in my career, but I broke the story of the buying this team, and one of my sources in doing that was extremely high up at the NBA, and their whole point, I was like, I have this source saying that Josh Harris is leading a group of a team, and their response is basically, and Dave Blitzer.
Yes,
Dave Blitzer is very important. Don't forget Dave Blitzer.
Everyone loves David Blitzer. Literally, I'm talking people in the business, and uncles, former roommates, friends who went to college, whatever it is, literally just whatever field, everyone loves it. And then the sentence ends there usually.
And he was they were supposed to alternate being governor, but Dave Blitzer's boss wouldn't allow it. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yeah, that it was going to rotate.
Maybe that's the guy who should be mentoring Joel.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so we're almost out of time. Last thing I wanted to ask you, Yaron, is Josh Harris is much more hands-on now, right? Since he's departed.
Yeah, here's my favorite. The way I like to describe this, there's a couple ways. So Sam Hinkie was a president of basketball operations. There's a couple of things here. Brian Colangelo was president of basketball operations. The Sixers don't have one now, right? Elton Brand is a GM, and that sounds silly, but I can promise you, there are few the Sixers in Sixers land. The org chart matters. That's something that they spend time on it. That's very important. And the fact that they don't have a president of basketball operations, they have to have a GM, I think is telling. It shows you there's a power vacuum basically after Colangelo's left, and Josh Harris. He was always hands-on, right? But I think it's you do this if you Henry. I'm sure you ask anyone who runs things in the Sixers, who makes basketball decisions, and you get different answers. And the Sixers will push back the second that you hear that, and they'll say Elton Brand is the GM. He does that. But Elton Brand was hired as a GM. He was forced to keep on that one of the reasons they didn't hire other GMs after Brian was out was because they said the whole staff has to stay, the whole front office the main guys have to stay on. It's a different kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Elton reports to Josh. Is that right?
Yeah.
How was that different than when Sam and Brian were doing it?
That's a good question. They're all reporting to Josh. They're ownership was always very I'll say updated or involved. There was a former minority owner named David Heller who had a big say. He used to come down around draft time. He would just show up and I want to say not run the draft room, but he would be around. He would show up kind of a month before and be in meetings, and he was very involved. And I think he got bought out last year. I don't think that's an accident. I think it's all connected, right? So if you're Josh Harris and you're an owner, I think a guy like David Heller, if he's a minority owner, right, he's doing that so he could play GM. If you're no longer playing GM, right? If you no longer have that power in the ownership group, what's the point? Right. So then I'm good. I'll cash out. So that's Harris definitely. I mean, Harris negotiated a lot of the Jimmy Butler trade, right? And that's kind of a known thing, right? That's a good example. We know that. I mean, Glenn Taylor we're doing on the phone. It's a good example.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we went a little bit over time. I'm going to hold up the book again because what David Letterman would do, and of course you always want to do. Letterman would do. Oh, here's the best part. Sam Hinkie doesn't really like the media. Look at this.
Great picture. It's a great picture. They should do the upgraded Sam, the new Sam Hinkie, the shaved head Sam Hinkie. That's my name. I like that with the goatee.
The sleeker version. All right, Yaron, congratulations on the book. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, David. I really can't recommend the book enough. Super great. And we'll do another one of these soon.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.